You know, I know him from a different time.
Yeah.
The sweetest, most fun boy, just adorable.
Cher is one of the most recognizable performers in modern music history. Yet, one of the least understood parts of her life is her relationship with her youngest son, Elijah Blue Allman. Born in 1976 to Cher and Southern rock legend Gregg Allman, Elijah entered a family already fractured by addiction, separation, and relentless public scrutiny. As if that wasn't bad enough, his parents' marriage collapsed almost as quickly as it began, leaving him to grow up between two worlds that were famous, unstable, and often unavailable. As Cher's career demanded constant reinvention and Gregg battled lifelong substance abuse, Elijah spent much of his childhood emotionally alone. By his early teens, the sense of distance had turned inward, shaping struggles that would follow him into adulthood. Where is he today? And what's the heartbreaking tragedy of Elijah Blue? Let's find out. Cher meets Gregg. By the time Cher met Gregg Allman, she was already a household name. Her marriage to Chaz Bono had just ended, and with it, a partnership that had defined both her personal life and early career. She was famous and independent, but privately, Cher was probably exhausted. Gregg Allman, on the other hand, was living a very different kind of fame. As a founding member of the Allman Brothers Band, he was celebrated for his raw talent and emotional depth. But his life was increasingly shaped by substance addiction. His creativity and instability often went hand in hand, and by the mid-1970s, his personal life was already unraveling. From their first date, which Gregg Allman described in his memoir My Cross to Bear as the worst in the history of mankind, it was clear that Cher and Gregg's relationship would be chaotic long before their son entered the world. When the duo met, the connection was immediate and intense. There was attraction, understanding, and a shared history of being consumed by the music industry. But there was also volatility. Unsurprisingly, their relationship moved quickly, skipping the slow work of stability and even caution. Within weeks of meeting, they were deeply involved, and in June of 1975, they tied the knot in Las Vegas. While it sounded really romantic to some fans, others were quick to note that their decision seemed more like a reflection of passion and urgency rather than long-term certainty. Unfortunately, these critics were right. Almost immediately, reality set in for the former lovebirds. Gregg's addiction resurfaced, and within days of the wedding, Cher realized this wasn't exactly how she wanted to spend the rest of her life. She filed for divorce, although they would reconcile and separate multiple times afterward. Somewhere in the middle of that turbulence, Elijah Blue Allman was born on July 10, 1976, and his birth would become both a temporary glue and a long-term complication in a marriage already on shaky ground. Elijah Blue Allman is born. For a moment, his arrival looked like it might stabilize things. A People magazine profile from the time even showed the family together and presenting a kind of rock and roll domestic bliss. In that article, Cher was quoted as believing Gregg had gotten sober and that their marriage would last. But it didn't. Gregg slipped back into substance use, famously once picking up Chastity Bono, now Chaz Bono, from school, forgetting how to get home, and stopping at a bar along the way. Cher, recognizing that the environment was no place for her children, made the painful decision to end the marriage for good. "I stayed with him until I knew I couldn't," she later said, "because I didn't want the kids to be around it." By the time Elijah Blue arrived, his parents' relationship was already fractured by separation, reconciliation, and the same unresolved struggles that had nearly ended it before it could begin. His name, Elijah Blue, would later feel quietly symbolic. Why? Because blue is often associated with depth, melancholy, and introspection. And these were all traits that would come to define him. But at birth, there was still hope. Cher loved her son deeply, even as she was being pulled in multiple directions at once. Her career demanded constant movement, public appearances, and reinvention. While motherhood demanded presence and stability, she struggled to fully provide alone. Gregg, meanwhile, was largely absent. His addiction, which had already strained the marriage, made consistency nearly impossible. Though he cared about his son, his life was unpredictable and shaped by cycles of recovery and relapse that left long gaps in Elijah's early relationship with him. From the start, Elijah was raised in contradiction. He was wanted and loved, but he was also born into instability. There were resources, support staff, and protection from material hardship, but emotional continuity was harder to maintain. Schedules shifted, households changed, and parental availability was inconsistent. While his earliest environment wasn't defined by chaos in the dramatic sense, it was defined by uncertainty, absence, and adults who cared, yet were often consumed by battles of their own, long before they could fully anchor a child who needed them. A lonely childhood. Elijah grew up in a world that, from the outside, looked impossibly privileged. There were large homes, constant travel, and a level of access that few children ever experience. But inside that world, daily life was surprisingly cold and solitary. Much of Elijah's upbringing was handled by nannies and caregivers, all people who provided structure and safety, but who were never meant to replace parents. It also didn't help that Cher's career during Elijah's childhood was relentless. On the one hand, it was really great for her. She was acting, touring, recording, and constantly reinventing herself in an industry that punished women for slowing down. On the other hand, though, her relationship with her son was suffering. But her absence wasn't rooted in indifference. It was merely the price of maintaining relevance and financial security in a system that demanded total commitment. Cher's highly visible social life included relationships with stars like Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise. Great on the outside, but for a child, intention mattered far less than presence. Years later, Elijah would openly describe feeling deeply lonely throughout his childhood. He spoke about growing up surrounded by people, yet rarely feeling truly seen. It's a shared emotion many children of famous parents later articulate: the contradiction of being materially provided for while emotionally adrift. When attention is split between millions of admirers and the demands of an industry, children can become part of the background, even when they are loved. Watching his mother be adored on a global scale only sharpened that feeling. Cher was celebrated, applauded, and constantly affirmed in public, while Elijah learned early how to sit quietly in the spaces left behind. Sadly, his relationship with Gregg followed a similar pattern. Gregg's presence in Elijah's life was inconsistent, limited by addiction and instability. There were moments of warmth and care, but they were often interrupted by long absences and unpredictability. It definitely didn't help a young Elijah that at age 7, he was shipped off to boarding school. According to reports, Cher had made the decision to provide structure and stability amidst her constant touring and the breakdown of her marriage. However, the effects weren't as positive as she might have imagined. Elijah later said that going away to school so young made him feel shunned by his parents, as though they were distancing themselves rather than protecting him. According to him, when you go to boarding school at 7 years old, it's kind of hard to feel like you're not being shunned. He went on to add that he's now at an age where he's making peace with it, but still, it doesn't mean it's right. It's still wrong to do that. Rather than offering stability, the boarding school experience created a sense of emotional distance between Elijah and his family. He shuffled from school to school, including a stint at a military school as a form of punishment for behavioral issues. Though he later credited the experience with giving him perspective on celebrity life, telling the Daily Mail, "Superstars are a difficult and unique breed." It also set the tone for years of emotional disconnection. With Cher on the road and Gregg largely absent, Elijah's day-to-day upbringing was more institutional than familial. He only saw his parents on weekends, and rather than easing their emotional bond, the separation deepened his sense of isolation. Sadly, Elijah's time away from home also exposed him to dangers most kids don't face until much later. In interviews, he has said he began experimenting with substances around age 11, when he would return home during school breaks and spend weekends in New York City. Instead of family dinners or supervision, he found himself roaming Harlem with friends, buying substances. He would later describe this behavior as a surreal normalcy at such a young age, as he was trying to escape all the things in his past. By age 11, Elijah wasn't riding his bike or playing video games. He was wandering the streets of Harlem during school breaks, buying substances with friends. To him, at the time, it didn't feel strange. It seemed normal at the time. This early exposure to substances was not an isolated statistic. It was the seed of a lifelong battle. After high school, Elijah formed the band Dead Z, never reaching commercial success, but finding himself entrenched in hardcore substance use. By the late 1990s, Elijah Blue was ready to step out of his mother's shadow, not as Cher's son, not as a celebrity heir, but as P. Exeter Blue One, the enigmatic frontman of the industrial rock band Dead Z. For the first time, he could define himself on his own terms, constructing a world where he had agency. Music was more than a passion. It was a shield, a language through which he could demand attention without being filtered through the lens of fame. Dead Z was not just a band. It was a legion, a meticulously crafted universe. Elijah developed a complex aesthetic he called the undercore, assigning each band member a color and a societal archetype: science, medicine, war, while he himself wore white, representing the academy, the repository of knowledge and authority. Yet, even at the height of his creativity, the inescapable burden of being a Nepo baby haunted him. No matter how elaborate the concept, no matter how dark and compelling the music, media attention inevitably circled back to his pedigree. Critics dismissed Dead Z as a vanity project, assuming the band's vision was only possible because of Cher's wealth and influence. His 2002 album Commencement earned cult admiration, but mainstream success remained elusive. The very fame he sought to escape clung to him like a shadow. The industry that should have been his proving ground became another stage for his struggles. Elijah himself later described the paradox. Being Cher's son opened doors but closed others, especially in the gritty industrial metal scene, where street cred mattered more than lineage. He craved respect for his craft, yet every press piece reminded him that, in the eyes of the world, he was still just Elijah Blue, Cher's kid. And while Dead Z was a sanctuary, it was also a crucible. Touring life offered independence, yes, but it also removed the faintest safety net he had left. Away from family, surrounded by peers experimenting with the same vices, his substance use shifted from curiosity to dependency. He later admitted that he was self-medicating, using substances to cope not only with industry pressures, but with the persistent echoes of his lonely boarding school years. The music, in a sense, became a plea, an attempt to externalize the unconditional love he longed for but rarely received. When his band was on the road, substance, pills, and alcohol became routine. "I was taking lots of substances on the road," he later shared in an interview. "I was using substances, taking a lot of pills, any painkiller we could get, and drinking." For Elijah, substances were not just recreational. They were a coping mechanism. "I was just looking to escape all the things in my past," he admitted. In a moment of heartbreaking honesty, he said that substance kind of saved me. "If I didn't have that at that point, I don't know what I would have done. You may jump off a bridge." He has since spoken openly about having close calls and feeling at the edge of mortality, always knowing his habits were dangerous but feeling powerless to stop. By 2007, the band went on hiatus. The universe Elijah had built, the Academy, the Legion, the Undercore, collapsed, leaving him exposed. He was no longer P. Exeter Blue I, frontman of a cult band. He was Elijah Blue, a man wrestling with substance abuse, lingering emotional trauma, and a world that continued to see him through the prism of tragedy rather than individuality. The contrast was stark. The precise all-white uniform of the stage versus paparazzi photos years later of him disheveled, using a cane. A far cry from the carefully curated image he once controlled. The Dead Sea era, in retrospect, was both a triumph and a tragedy. It was Elijah's first real attempt to claim identity, to communicate his inner life through art. And yet, it also marked the beginning of deeper struggles, reminders that for all his talent and vision, the quest for recognition and unconditional love could not be fully realized through music alone. Although Elijah had a half-sibling, the relationship with his older brother Chaz Bono, Cher's first child from her previous marriage, never provided the emotional anchor that a tight sibling bond can. The two grew distant during their years at different schools, with Elijah later describing their relationship as rocky and marked by long periods of limited contact. The emotional distance widened further after Chaz's transition and subsequent award-winning documentary Becoming Chaz. While Cher initially struggled with Chaz's transition, she eventually came to terms with it. Elijah, on the other hand, has been more reserved in public comments about the matter. Their connection was muddled by geography, life paths, and the separate emotional worlds they inhabited. But what happened in Elijah's personal life? Marriage, reconciliation, and continuing strain. In 2013, Elijah married singer Mary Angela "Queenie" King, the frontwoman of the band King. They met on a blind date in Cologne, Germany, and eloped without Cher's attendance, a pointed omission rooted in lingering family tensions. After returning to the United States, Elijah and his wife stayed with Cher for a time, but as disagreements grew, they moved out and ultimately tied the knot, surrounded by close friends. That marriage mirrored patterns in his own life. Passionate beginnings, followed by turmoil. By 2020, the couple had separated, and Elijah filed for divorce. They later attempted a reconciliation 2 years later, but the relationship remained strained, intersecting with family conflict and legal battles involving Cher's efforts to bring him into rehab and care. Perhaps the most jarring chapter in Elijah's adult life surfaced in late 2023. During divorce proceedings, Mary Angela made a bombshell allegation. She claimed that while she and Elijah were attempting to reconcile in a New York City hotel, 4 men entered the room and removed Elijah at the behest of his mother. While Cher later told People magazine, "That rumor is not true," she didn't deny that an intervention had taken place. The incident pretty much showed the sheer desperation of their relationship. It painted a picture of a mother willing to use extreme, almost paramilitary measures to save a son she believed was at death's door, and a son who felt his autonomy was being stripped away by the very woman who was rarely there during his childhood. Hospitalizations, conservatorship battles, and public concern. In December that same year, Cher took an extraordinary step by filing for a conservatorship over Elijah's estate, claiming he was substantially unable to manage his financial resources due to severe mental health and substance abuse issues. Her attorneys stated that any money distributed to him from a trust established by his late father Gregg would likely be immediately spent on substances, leaving Elijah at risk. The battle became public and contentious. Elijah opposed the conservatorship, stating in filings that while he had struggled with addiction, he did not believe he was mentally ill and did not need his mother's help managing his finances. He wrote that he had attended AA meetings and maintained some months of sobriety, arguing that he was capable of making his own decisions. Despite Cher's renewed filings and concerns, a judge denied the temporary conservatorship in early 2024 due to insufficient evidence that it was urgently needed. The case continued through legal wrangling, but by September that same year, Cher voluntarily dismissed her petitions after mediation and private agreements. Yet, the concerns have not gone away. In mid-2025, Elijah was hospitalized after an apparent overdose in Southern California. Law enforcement responded to a call about erratic behavior and found substances inside his residence. Medical personnel evaluated him and he was transported for treatment. In later months, photographers captured Elijah outside the famed Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, disheveled, using a cane, and appearing physically unwell, all images that reignited public worry about his condition. Sources close to him described his ongoing struggles with addiction, along with incidents including alleged opioid and fentanyl found at a friend's property where he had been staying. Despite every obstacle, the interesting thing is that Elijah's story is not one-dimensional. People who care about him, including his estranged wife, Mary Angela King, have spoken publicly about their support for his recovery. After the 2025 hospitalization, Mary Angela said she still wished him well, emphasizing that Elijah continues to confront his inner struggles from a place of strength, not defeat. Cher, too, has expressed regret over the instability of their family life, acknowledging that her career often pulled her away from her children's daily realities. She has said that being a parent didn't always mix well with her professional life and has publicly voiced a desire for more stability in hindsight. But this hospitalization wasn't the first time Elijah faced serious health issues. Back in 2005, he contracted a severe case of Lyme disease, reportedly while traveling in India. The illness left him debilitated, drained, and at times near death. Yet, for years, his claims were met with disbelief, even from his mother. He later told the Daily Mail, "You absolutely need unconditional parental love in those dark hours." That was lacking from that direction. At one point, he sought treatment at a costly alternative medicine facility in Germany, under the care of Dr. Ursula Jacob, but the methods proved unsuccessful. The disease compounded the sense of fragility and isolation that had been present since his childhood, leaving him with lingering health issues that persist to this day. So, where's Elijah Blue today? As of early 2006, Elijah Blue is focusing on his health following a serious medical emergency in mid-2025. He remains in contact with his family, who are reportedly prioritizing his long-term wellness and stability. What do you think of Elijah's tragic life? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.